Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Brennan. Good to see you all here. If you are in the room, we are glad that you are here this morning. If you're joining us online, we're glad you're here as well. Just a couple of quick announcements of things that are coming up that you need to be aware of. All of these, by the way, are on your announcement sheet on the bulletin that you were handed when you came in. They are also all on your Church Center app. So if you have that and want to take a look, all the info that you need is in there too. So we'll talk through them quickly here. Brian, you want to put up that first one? Today, branch students, if you're in grades 6 through 12, you are going for fall fun. A maze, and is there an actual hayride? S'mores, bonfire, donuts, good times. If you have signed up, thank you. If you haven't, or if you haven't let one of us know, talk to me or Mike or Janelle, Elizabeth, CJ, Jeff and Sarah, any of your leaders. You can tell to make sure they know you're going to be here. Transportation, are you meeting here? Okay. Got it. We will assume you are getting yourself there. If that is not true, let us know. Okay? Hopefully everybody will get there. It'll be great. Next Sunday, just a reminder, is a group Sunday. If you were here last week, you were a part of one of those groups. If you haven't been to the branch before and don't know what I'm talking about and would like to learn more, I'd love to tell you here in a couple of minutes after or during our greeting time. We just set aside a few Sundays to do things a little differently. We break into small groups and build community and do some activities together instead of sitting here in this room together. So next Sunday as well is our monthly potluck. We've started this rhythm of the first Sunday of the month doing a potluck. So that's next Sunday already. It's November this week. Crazy. So we're going to do a baked potato bar. You can sign up to bring food with that QR code. It is also in your Church Center app. It'll be immediately following worship. We'll just go right downstairs and share a meal together. Is that it? Is that the last one? Oh yeah, that one. I skipped one. Chris is probably going to talk a little bit more about this later. I didn't ask him, so are you going to talk about this later? Nope, never mind. So Thursday night this week, there is a conversation in Holland hosted by Josh Viss, who Chris works with at his other job. And he is interviewing Kristen Dumais, who is the author of Jesus and John Wayne, if you've read that book. She's going to be talking about Christian nationalism and the harmful effects that has had, is having, will have. If you would like to go to that is, you just go. There's no sign up for it, but you just go. If you want to carpool or anything like that, I'm planning to go. Chris is planning to go. So let us know, and we can figure that out as well. All right, I think that's it. Take a minute, stand up where you are, turn to the person next to you, say hello, and share with them something that has brought you delight this week. There is plenty of hard and awful and sad in the world, and we're not ignoring that, but we also want to say there's good too. So why don't you share some of the good with the people around you today, and then we'll be right back and move on. Go. If you're on the, welcome to do that in the chat.
Test. Okay, folks, if you could wrap up your conversations. Head back to your seats. This is the introvert in me. Stopping this nonsense. Just kidding. Too much chatting. We're going to work through a liturgy this morning, and it's called the Liturgy for Embracing Both Joy and Sorrow, which is pretty timely. I'll read the part of the one, you can read the part of the all, and then in the middle we're going to have a little bit of a pause for instructions. Do not be distant, O Lord, lest we find the burdens of this world too heavy and shrink from the necessary experience of grief. Do not be distant, O Lord, lest we are so mired in yesterday's hurts that we miss entirely the living gifts this day might hold. Let us neither ignore our pain, pretending all is okay when it isn't, nor magnify our pain so that we dull our capacity to experience all that remains good in this life. Amidst the pain that fills these days, give us courage, O Lord. Courage to live these days fully. Courage to love and to allow ourselves to be loved. Courage to remember, grieve, and honor what was. And courage to live with thanksgiving in what is, and to invest in the hope of what will be. For this is who we are, a people shaped in the image of God, whose very being generates all joy in the universe, yet who also weeps and grieves its brokenness. So we, your children, also lament the world's pain, even as we cling to the hope of restoration. Let us learn, O Lord, to do this as naturally as the inhale and exhale of a single breath. This next part I'm going to read slowly. Feel free to breathe in and breathe out as you feel comfortable. If you want to close your eyes, that's fine too. To breathe out sorrow. To breathe in joy. To breathe out lament. To breathe in hope. To breathe out pain. To breathe in comfort. To breathe out sorrow. To breathe in joy. And here, between the tension, between what was and what will be, in the very is of now, may our hearts be surprised by, shaped by, warmed by, remade by the same joy that forever wells within and radiates from your heart, O God. Amen. Please stand for the song.
Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love. And higher than the mountains that I face, stronger than the power of the grave, and constant in the trial and the change. Just one thing remains, one thing remains. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love. And on and on and on and on it goes. It overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid. Just one thing remains. Just one thing remains. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid. There's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love. And on and on and on and on it goes. It overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid. Just one thing remains. One thing remains. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love.
You can have a seat, everybody. A needed reminder in the midst of this world that we're living in and that we've already talked about in our call to worship this morning, this reminder that the divine love is always with us. It never fails. That is a promise we need to hold tight to, I think, every day, but maybe especially today. I want to just say a quick little word here. I did mention on Facebook that I was going to be talking about Israel-Palestine this morning, and some very dear people to me saw that post and decided to come, and that is an aunt and uncle of mine, my mom's sister, and her husband, Uncle Joe, and Aunt Archie, who are somewhere nearby. I mean, I'll just generally point in their direction. These folks took me in when I transferred from Central Michigan to Grand Valley after my freshman year of college. And I transferred so late there was no on-campus housing available. And they lived in Jenison and willingly opened up their home to me. And didn't just do that, but they were so kind and loving that they fed me ice cream at every dinner. And my aunt, I mean, it's a little embarrassing to say, but she did my laundry, even though I protested at first, not long, mind you, but I did protest at first, and they created a home for me. When my mom, my brothers were living in Virginia. So I was in college, with really nowhere to go home to, and they became my home and my family. And so, thank you. It's a joy to have them here this morning. And others who are with us as guests this morning, thanks for being here. Let me just give a little bit of background to what I'm going to be talking about this morning. Earlier this year, so this has not been a long thing for me, just a matter of months, but I've begun a part-time job within the denomination that we're a part of in their world or global mission department, working with a friend and activist, Josh Viss. Some of you may remember Josh has been here before. And what we do in our work is we try to help people gain a greater understanding of the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. And we do that by providing resources and opportunities to learn, and we take people to that place as well. What that means is that this war that's currently happening in Gaza is more personal for me now than it ever has been. And that's kind of inevitable, right? If you travel to a place for any reason, things that then happen there that you maybe hear about later on mean more to you because you've actually been there. It's personal to you. And so every Sunday I try to preach at least part of my heart, to have part of my heart included in what I preach. And it felt like there was no way for me to be kind of authentic in this moment than to say something about this war. But what to say? This is obviously, or I hope obviously, an enormously complex and pain-filled conflict. What can be said in 20 or so minutes that's of any meaning? And I also recognize that this is a situation happening halfway around the world that not all of us can or even should be deeply invested in. What I mean by that is there's so much in the world happening all of the time, so much injustice, so much pain, that you as an individual, I as an individual, cannot hold all of it by ourselves. And so we have to choose wisely. What do we invest our energy in? What do we give our time to? Because we can't give it to everything. So what to say about this conflict, and what to say knowing that all of us might be responding to it at different levels. And where I landed, we'll see if it's of any meaning, is to simply share a couple of things that I've been wrestling with. I don't have answers this morning. I don't have any great solutions, of course. I just want to share a couple of things that I've been thinking about, that I think this conflict has made, it has elevated or made clear. And I want to suggest to you this morning that these two things that I'm going to raise that are true of what's happening in Israel and in Gaza are things that are also true here in your life and in mine, right where you are. So we'll see if anything in there is helpful to you. I hope something is. The first thing I've been, not the first thing I've been wrestling with, one more thing. I'm not this morning getting into the nitty-gritty of this conflict. I'm not getting into the history of this conflict. What I will offer you are some resources. I've got probably enough copies for one per household, so start there and maybe there will be more, but pass these around. They're just resources that can provide some of that, some of the history, some perspective I can't provide. Maybe something in there will be helpful. Maybe the thing I also will point you most toward is the thing in the bottom right, which is an invitation to a screening of a film that Josh made a couple of years ago on the conflict. We've rented a theater. A generous donor has made that possible. So this is free. It's open to anyone, not just the branch, to come and see this documentary on November 12th in Granville at the Celebration Cinema there. So you can find all the details in that sheet. Okay. So here's something I've been wrestling with. that I think the war has made clear, but I also, again, think is true in our lives here and now. We are quick to believe that vengeance will bring the future that we want. We are quick to believe that vengeance will bring the future that we want. That one of the articles that's in that sheet that just went around, there's a quote from A.R. Moxon. He writes this, that there seems to be an instinct to seek safety through harm. There seems to be a human instinct to seek safety through harm. When we are harmed, we imagine that revenge will heal the wound that has been opened. And both Israelis and Palestinians have decades of wounds. Right? This war that's happening now it's not the first moment of violence. This conflict didn't start 3 weeks ago. In fact, this isn't the first war in Gaza. Maybe it's the first war that you're aware of. The others were not nearly as big or significant. But this is not the first time that Hamas has indiscriminately fired rockets that have killed civilians. Nor is it the first time that Israel has dropped bombs, I might suggest to you indiscriminately, that have killed civilians. This is just another ideation, unfortunately, of an escalating cycle of violence. And what we're witnessing right now are the predictable outcomes of vengeance: pain and death. And let me be very clear, Hamas's attack on October 7th was a clear act of vengeance. Retaliation, it was revenge, hate-filled revenge for the death and destruction brought by Israel in years past. And now Israel is responding in kind, at least in part. One of the members of Israel's parliament said after the October 7th attacks, this is Nissim Baturi, he's a member of the Likud party, he called for erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, has promised, and these are his words, mighty vengeance. And I'm sure Hamas is saying the same thing. Their quotes are just not quite as easy to find. My point is that the cycle continues. And it's not that feelings of vengeance are not understandable. They are understandable. When we've been wounded and traumatized, we can seemingly instinctively want to exact the same pain on the one who has caused it for us. But I think what we must ask ourselves, both when we are looking at a war and when we are thinking about our own lives, our individual lives, your relationships, we should be asking ourselves, does vengeance bring us the future we want? On the night when Jesus was arrested, we read this: when Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, "Lord, should we strike with our swords?" Vengeance. And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Wow. No more of this. It's really actually a very stunning thing to say. When Jesus' life is threatened in that moment, he's about to be arrested. He knows what lies ahead for him. And not only does he say no more of this, but he then takes the additional step of healing the one who has come to harm him. Just hours later, after Jesus is arrested, we read this in chapter 23 of Luke. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. And Jesus said, "Forgive them. They know not what they do." What does Jesus mean? Because, of course, these soldiers know what they're doing. Like, they know that they are crucifying someone. That's not lost on them. So Jesus isn't talking about it in that way, I don't think. Perhaps what he is saying is that these soldiers are caught up in a system of oppression and violence that has become so normal, vengeance has become so normal, that they don't even realize that they're caught up in it. They don't realize that they've come to believe that crucifying their enemies would bring about the future they wanted. They've gotten to the place where they've justified their violence. And perhaps we, you and me, maybe we don't realize how easily and quickly we are caught up in the belief that vengeance will bring us the future we want. I think, again, we're quick to believe this on an international level and on an individual level as well. And this is what I've been wrestling with the last few weeks, especially, honestly, the individual part. I'm trying to hold space to both examine what's happening on a macro level, but also see what that might say about the micro, about my life and your life here. Because I think it does have something to say. I think there are echoes in our lives of what we might notice is happening over there. It's not the same thing. It's not the same scale. The circumstances aren't exactly the same, but there are echoes of it. See, if someone says something to me or about me that hurts me, there's a serious part of me that wants to hurt them back. Revenge can seem like the way to make things right, or at least better. If a boss gives me a bad review that I think is unfair, I know how easily I can harbor resentment toward them and just wait for the moment to embarrass them. Maybe wait till they make a mistake and then make that mistake public to everyone, right? As a pastor, I've sat with couples who get caught in an escalating cycle of retaliation. And they ask to meet with me because the wounds have become so painful, the cycle so destructive, that they're not sure that they can stay together anymore. Right? This happens in our world here and now, this same belief. Politically, of course, we know this. Both sides are quick to use the power that they might have to retaliate against their political opponent. We're quick to believe that vengeance will bring us the future we want, but here's, of course, the truth: it never does. It only escalates. And I think we see that clearly playing out today in Israel and in Gaza. Retaliation may bring a small bit of relief, but it's only followed by dissatisfaction and a lingering emptiness. And so Jesus says, no more of this. We must choose another way, and there is another way. How do we move in a new direction? Well, that leads to the second thing I've been wrestling with. We are quick to oversimplify. So can we hold space for complexity, for both and? When I've only been on a couple of tours in Israel, so I can't speak as like this massive expert, but I know what has happened the couple of times I've gone, Josh has told me, happens on every tour. Most of the people who go are, well, all of them, I think, actually, it would be safe to say, are from the United States. So we take Americans to Israel, Palestine. An overwhelming majority of those people come on those trips with a pro-Israeli bent. And that's normal. If you live in this country and you consume the traditional forms of media, and it maybe also, especially if you are an evangelical Christian, you're almost certainly going to have a pro-Israel bent. What happens on our trip is people meet Israelis and Palestinians, as they hear their stories, as they walk the land, as they learn about the history of the conflict, they begin to change the way they think about the current situation. And what often happens, interestingly, is people who are pro-Israel, you want to guess? Become completely pro-Palestinian. And part of the work that we are always doing at the end of our tours is trying to help people be here. To hold both a view that can allow for the humanity of Palestinians and Israelis. To hold a view, to hold space, to see both as having legitimate cause for their grievances, to see both as contributors to the problem, to see both as having a claim to the land. It's somewhere in between. It's both and. But we're, as human beings, I think, we tend to oversimplify. And one of the most common ways that we do this with our enemy is we demonize. We demonize the enemy. The Israeli defense minister, and I know I'm only reading things from the Israeli government, but again, Hamas doesn't get quoted a lot, and they're also a terrorist organization. I really don't care so much what they say, know what they're going to say. You know, Israel's a democracy, a self-proclaimed democracy, trying to stand up for human rights, it would say. And so when the defense minister, the person in charge of the military, says on October 8, we are fighting human animals and we act accordingly, Gaza will not return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything. I think we have a clear picture of an oversimplification. That's the nice way of saying it. It's really a demonizing and a dehumanizing way of talking about the Palestinian people. And here's the thing, I think that we do this. We oversimplify our enemy. We demonize and dehumanize them because it helps us justify our vengeance. The two are connected. If I can paint you as fill in the blank, a purely evil enemy, well then it's much easier to justify any action I might take against you. Whether it's humane or not, whether it takes into account civilian casualties or not, I'm just more easily able to justify it. And again, this happens on a macro scale, and it happens in our own lives as well. I think we do this too. Again, we do it with the other political party. In fact, some politicians have made it their brand to demonize the other side. But listen, some may do it very publicly and brazenly, but let's be honest, both political parties are guilty of dehumanizing and demonizing the other side. It's an easy trap to fall into. And then there are ways that we do it personally. You know, when I've been hurt by someone, I tend to not become outwardly loud or violent, right? Okay. Most of the time. What I do is I go inward. I go inward when someone has hurt me. But inside, what's happening is I am creating a narrative about the events. They always do this. They never do this, which is what? It's an oversimplification. Maybe I'm not demonizing the other person. Maybe I am. But I'm creating a narrative. I'm oversimplifying this person who's hurt me so that I can justify whatever sort of retaliatory actions I might take. I think we do this too. And it's easy to do. Jesus, though, says, no more of this. We don't have to demonize, and we don't have to choose vengeance. I came across a quote from an Israeli mother. Let me read it to you. I think she helps us see that there is another way. My name is Michal Halev. My son Lavor was murdered last week by Hamas terrorists. So her son is killed in the October 7th attacks. I make this appeal for love and healing instead of vengeance because I don't want other mothers to experience the unbearable pain I'm going through. Please help people the world over hear my anguish, and maybe seeds of peace can be planted in the fields of battle and hatred. Please, no vengeance in my name. She, amazingly, is not the only one saying things like this. I've come across a couple of others this week. And they have been like a sliver of a crack of light in all of this darkness. She somehow has the eyes to see that vengeance will only lead to more mothers experiencing unbearable pain. Vengeance only leads to more pain. And instead of oversimplifying the Palestinian people as a purely evil enemy, she sees them as mothers and fathers and sons and daughters. Both Israelis and Palestinians deserve to have their children come home. Both Israelis and Palestinians are fully, beautifully human. And I know that both and is harder. That's not lost on me. I know that oversimplification is easier. Vengeance is easier. Holding complexity is difficult. It takes work. But it is the only way to peace. Peace internationally, peace individually. And so I've been wrestling with this both and, with trying to hold complexity. And I know this morning so far, really, we've been talking about both and in terms of our relationships with each other. But I've also been wrestling with it more broadly. Just the way in which complexity shows up in life in general. You know, that in this world that we live in, you know, there is both darkness and light. There's hopelessness and hope. It's both and. My boss can be really unjust and really kind. My partner can say words that harm and words that restore. It's both and. We're tempted to make this world black and white, but it just isn't. It's complex, it's layered, it's full of contradiction and paradox. It's a world with both winter and spring, both delight and despair, both endings and beginnings, confusion and clarity, vengeance and compassion. Can we make space for it all? Can we be open to that complexity and trust that God is there always with us? Let me end with one more teaching from Jesus. This comes from Matthew 5. You have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. This is an oversimplification. Hate your enemy. Your enemy is only worthy of hatred. Why? Well, whatever. Find a reason. But it's an oversimplification. And Jesus says, you've heard the law. This is actually what it says in the law of the Jewish people in the Old Testament. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. I can't think of a more complex thing to do than pray for the people who persecute you. To hold space in prayer for the person who's persecuting you. In that way, Jesus says, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven, for he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you're kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. That word perfect there trips us up sometimes. To our English ears, we may then think that Jesus is saying you have to do everything perfectly correct, that there's some checklist that you've got to get everyone right. The word here is really about maturity. It's about wholeness. Be whole, Jesus says. Be mature as your heavenly Father is. This is the call. It's maybe one of the hardest calls given to us. And again, for some of us this morning, this conflict in Israel and Palestine may have a hold of our heart, and it's primarily what we're thinking about as I'm talking or as you came in here. And again, some of us are thinking about other things in our lives or in the world that are close to our hearts, but for which this may apply. I know that we're all in different places. What I want to invite us to do this morning is to consider that wherever we are or whatever is on our heart, to just consider what it would mean to try and hold both and in that situation. On your seat or near a seat, and if you don't have any more in your row, there's probably one in a row near you, are these connected pieces of paper. This would be a way of responding this morning to write a both and. On one sheet of paper, to write one of the things, and on the other sheet, of course, write the other, these things that might be in tension, these things that may seem like paradoxes, or just two things that speak of the complexity of the world. And then back behind you is this set of partitions, and there are a bunch of thumbtacks back there. I mean, there are lots of ways to engage this. You could simply write your both and then take it home with you. Maybe you need to hang on to this. You also could pin it to that board, a way of us just kind of collectively trying to give expression to this desire to be people of compassion, to be people who hold light amidst the darkness, to be people who can see the humanity even in the enemy. Whew. So I'm going to give you a moment here to just reflect on what might be the both and for you this morning. Here's some, again, kind of prompts. That's all that these are. They're possibilities, or they may spark other ideas for you. And about a minute or so to reflect and to write, and then we'll offer communion. And in that space of communion, you'll have the chance to come and receive bread and cup if you would like. In that space and time as people are moving, though, and coming and getting bread and cup, you also will have space and time to go back and, again, pin those both ands up if you would like to. So there's just going to be some space here to respond. And one of the ways is to reflect, to write, to pin, and again, I'll introduce communion here in just a moment, and we'll share that together as well. Let's take a moment to have a couple of deep breaths and to reflect on what this might mean for us, where we are today. We'll share this meal, and we'll move forward together. This meal is one of complexity and seeming paradox. How can the laying down of your life lead to life? And yet it does. So we take and we eat and we remember that when we do that ourselves, when we lay down our lives, it leads to life. And when we receive the life that Jesus has laid down, again, we receive. So let's take and eat, remembering those things this morning. And in the same way, how can emptying yourself lead to filling? I don't always know the answer to that, and yet I find it to be true time and time again. And so we receive this complexity, allowing it to fill us as we take and drink. Amen. Amen. Well, we have one more song that we're going to sing. It's short. It's simple. It may be familiar to you. It may not. It may be new to you. If it's new, you can simply allow the words to be the gift that they are. Allow the voice of someone around you who is singing to be a gift. But it's a request. It's a prayer, really. Lord, make me an instrument of peace. So let's stand as we close with that song this morning.
Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is darkness, let me sow light. For in the giving we shall receive, and in the dying we're given life. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Amen. Amen.
Here for anyone who wants to stick around. And I don't know, we'll see how long it goes. If there's one question, then 5 minutes. And if there's more, then it'll be more. We're going to start in here. We have some time to stay in this space that allows us to keep streaming, since I know there's some folks online. If it keeps going and there's robust dialogue, then we might have to transition to another room to let the Congolese church get in here and have the time that they need. But we'll start in here. Let me offer this blessing, though. And then if you are leaving for the morning and you're on your way, blessings to you. Go. There's no pressure to stick around, of course. And if you're staying, we'll take just a minute and then we'll get started. That song is a prayer, and may it also be a blessing to you. May you be an instrument of peace this week, of shalom, of wholeness, of restoration. Be those people. Amen. Thanks for being here, everybody. We'll continue the conversation in just a minute. And again, blessings if you're headed on with your day today. All right, folks, why don't we get started? Why not? And you are welcome to leave any time you need to leave, right? If you've got 10 minutes to hang around for 10 minutes. If you've got whatever. I have, just be very clear, I have no agenda here. I don't have like, we're going to talk about this, and then that's not really what I planned. And so really anything is fair game here. You might have questions or things you want to say about what I said this morning. Maybe you want to push back. You're welcome to push back on anything I said or ask questions about anything I said. Maybe you have questions about the current war and the situations and circumstances around it. Maybe you have questions about the larger historical context in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Am I going to be able to answer everything? I'm sure not. I'll just say if I don't know, I don't know. But let's see what kind of dialogue there is and what kind of questions there might be, or things you're wondering about, or things that you're not sure, they don't make sense, or you can't quite make, again, heads or tails of, and we'll see if there's some clarity that can come. So who's going to be brave enough to start? Deb. And I'm going to, I'll start by repeating the question, but I might actually pass the microphone around because I don't know where it is. I want the people online to be able to hear your questions. I know no one likes a microphone, but we do want the people online to be able to hear us. So, Deb, what's your question? I'll repeat it this time.
How can we get people to understand the difference between, you can be anti-Zionist and not anti-Semitic, and you can be anti-terrorist but not anti-Palestinian?
Yeah. I think you're asking maybe a question about the simplifications we make, right? How do we not see Palestinians things as, or not paint them all in one way or as all terrorists? How do we maybe say something critical about Israel, but how do we do it in a way that doesn't mean we're anti-Semitic? Is that kind of your question?
Yeah, I mean, we equate one with the other and they're not the same.
Yeah, they're not the same. Yeah, I don't know. Next question. I mean, this is. I think part of the way that we move away from the oversimplification is we have to rehumanize whoever it is that we tend to simplify, or demonize or dehumanize. This is the gift of coming on a tour that we lead, is that you meet human beings. And what was just a category now becomes a human. And that is a fundamental shift. So if you are not planning a trip to Israel-Palestine soon, then you would be wise, I think, to find trusted voices who are Israeli, who are Palestinian, who can speak to what is happening there from a variety of angles. And their stories can help rehumanize this conflict so that it moves away from just being them versus us and us versus them. But that takes work, that takes time. Yeah. If you don't know, if you want to do that, if you're curious about, well, where do I go to do that, I would be happy to point you in the direction of some people. You'll just have to tap me on the shoulder or send me an email right now. You have a phone, send me an email and say, hey, I'd like you to point me to some people. In the handout I gave, one of the links, I think at the top, is to Josh's Substack page. Substack is just like a blog, essentially, where all kinds of people blog. And in one of the articles that he has posted is a list of Twitter folks and other people that you can follow on social media who will provide a variety of perspectives and who will help rehumanize. I think that's what we have to do.
I think part of it is those that have gone to that area before the wall do not see what the wall physically has done. Because I went in November of '84, and there was a wall, but it wasn't a visible wall. And I think those people that have been
To that point, and then we can go to the next question. I'll just say that the film that Josh has made, which, by the way, I didn't say this, you can come to Celebration Cinema. I think there's something about seeing it in a theater and with a group of people, and Josh will be there, and he'll do some Q&A afterwards, so there's some benefits maybe. We're also making it available on YouTube. And anybody can watch it for free. That's coming in the next couple days. So if you can't make it on the 12th, there will be a way to see it. But that film does help people understand the wall and other tools that Israel uses. Who else has a question? My dear uncle.
I don't need a mic. I just want to address this.
I know you don't want. Okay, sure. You want me to repeat it? Okay, fine. Yep. All right. You're my elder. I respect you. Go ahead.
Well, my impression is that like half the citizens of Israel are for a two-state solution, and those people are probably also against leveling Gaza like they're doing. And how come this has never moved forward much over the years?
Yeah, the age-old question why Joe is saying if half of Israel is for a two-state solution, then why can't a solution be found? Or why isn't there maybe a more vocal protest against the way in which Israel is going about this current war? One thing I would say is that I'm not sure that I'd have to look at some recent polling. I know one recent poll, it was like 4 or 5 elections ago, but in Israel, that's a short period of time, right? 5 elections for us is 20 years, not in Israel because they have a parliamentary and they've had a real trouble forming governments. Relatively recently, when people were asked in exit polls, where does the Palestinian and Israeli conflict rank in the issues that you are concerned about and voting on, it was 14th. Number 5 was cottage cheese, the price of cottage cheese. I'm not joking. Some of our exit polling, by the way, is not particularly encouraging either when you watch what people are voting on, but that's another conversation. So I don't know what the numbers are, Joe. I think that actually what has happened in Israel, I think you would probably have to say in the last decade for sure, is that the average Israeli citizen doesn't have to think about Palestine. They live in relative comfort and safety. Yes, Hamas occasionally fires rockets, but they're homemade rockets that are easily shot down by the Iron Dome system 99 out of 100 times. And so people go about their lives. If you visit Jaffa, for example, I was there about 6 weeks ago, it's gorgeous, and it's thriving, and it's this incredible metropolitan city. You had no sense that there was this decades-long conflict involving there was just no sense of it. The only place where you get it in Israel is Jerusalem, because West Jerusalem is Jewish, East Jerusalem is Palestinian, and that divide is clear and tangible. Most everywhere else, it's just not on the minds of people. And so that's a real problem. There isn't a political will to do much, or there hasn't been. Will this conflict change things? Who's to say? I mean, I just don't know. But that's part of the reason why there's no solution. The other part is that it's wildly complex with decades of trauma. That's unaddressed largely. No one recognizes the trauma of the other, and so we get nowhere. That's the other part. I don't know if that helps or not, but Jeff, you had a question? I'm going to give you the mic. You're not my elder, so.
I don't know, when were you born?
You might be my elder.
I might by a couple days. I guess I want to go back to what you were talking about, and no one's trying to bomb my house, right?
Yep.
But I still have the urge when someone says something about me to get vengeance. So what personal work? Well, I mean, what do you think? What personal work can be done to walk away from that? I think the urge is always there, right?
Yeah.
It's we're humans.
Yep.
But what personal work can be done to walk away from that urge, or to be able to break that spell quicker? If that makes sense.
It's a great question. There's some therapists in the room. You want to say anything? Either of you? Do you? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I will. I was just thinking. I think this is just. We have to have a relationship with that part of ourselves that wants vengeance. So even acknowledging it, I think, is the begin. Like to actually consciously feel, this is me. And then if I have a relationship with that part of myself, I can maybe slow down enough to make a choice about how I behave. And then maybe be with someone who I love, who could support me in my anger, in my vengeance, without exacting it in a behavior that would like lead to a future I don't want.
Yeah.
I don't know if that.
I think that's helpful. I'll say something that I've been thinking about a lot, and it connects to what you just said, so it made me think about it. I don't need this. You said when we are angry, when we've been hurt, we sometimes need a friend, a loved one who's trustworthy to sit with us because we can't see clearly, right? Israel has been traumatized in unimaginable ways. And on the international stage, the closest thing to a friend is an ally, maybe? I mean, it's not the same, but I've been thinking about that. What closer ally does Israel have than the United States? So I'm going to get a little political here, and I apologize. You're certainly welcome to disagree with me. It wouldn't be the first time. I am not sure we're being a very good friend at the moment. There have been little things that have been said by the administration to caution Israel to not act out of rage, but it's been little, in my opinion. Most of what we have said has really been a blank check to let them respond however they want to. And that troubles me because I see the cost of it in Gaza right now, and I wonder, I really don't, in a sense, well, I would like Israel's leaders to lead better than they are. Yes, but I also recognize the trauma that they've experienced, and they might need someone to come upside and say, hey, we see your pain. This is horrendous. And this path that you are on is only going to make things worse. Because I do believe that. I think that this current trajectory is only going to make things worse. And it really won't bring the future that Israel hopes. Who else has a thought or question you want to push back on that? Deb, I'm going to see if anybody else does. Anybody else have a question? Sorry. You're good.
So, as a history teacher,
Ooh. Uh-oh. Mm-hmm.
I think I get into, obviously, the background and the backstory of this, and I'm not going to go there. If you want to figure it out, there's a lot of places you can go look. But the idea that gets brought up when I teach this is like, how do you stop war? Is there a point in time where there's the quote-unquote just war? And that is such a complicated thing, and it's hard for the United States to talk to Israel about it when 9/11 happened, or one thing happened to us, and we decided that it was important to go get our vengeance, and lots of things have happened to Israel. So, is there a point in time where you do have to step up to stop a Hitler? Is there a point in time where there is a situation where you do have to step up? And I'm not saying that is the case right now.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, how do you talk about or have that conversation in my classroom in a way that doesn't seem trivial and trite, to a lot of people
Yeah.
who have spent a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah. Here's what I guess I'll offer, because what you're asking is, and you know this, is an issue and a topic that has been debated for centuries, right? I'm viewing it from a Christian perspective. What's the Christian view of war? When is war just? What should we do? I don't really know the answer to that question. I think what troubles me in this moment is that does Israel have a legitimate right to respond to the attacks by Hamas? I would say yes. Hamas is a dangerous organization that wreaks pain and death. I mean, that seems clear, at least in part. So should something be done? This is my opinion again, just mine. Yes. But how is it done? And right now, to try and give you some sense of this conflict, in the first week of this war, Israel dropped 6,000 bombs in an area the size of twice of Washington, D.C. So 2 Washington, D.C.s is, if that helps, roughly the state of Delaware is the size of Gaza, 6,000 bombs. To put that, what does that mean? We have no sense of what that means. One maybe helpful way to get some perspective on that, when we were fighting the war in Afghanistan, the result of our vengeance, 20 years, only in 4 of those years did we drop more than 6,000 bombs in a year on a country. I don't know, how, I can't quite get my head around how that is a responsible response that has any sense of the humanness of the Palestinian people in mind. I just don't know how to do that. And again, it's not that I'm saying Israel should just do nothing or that what Hamas did is fine, but to cut off food and water, let alone drop 6,000 bombs, take the bombs off the table. I'm not a military strategist, I don't know. To cut off food and water from 2.3 million people, I have no room for that in my kind of view of things. It feels wildly indiscriminate. So there's some strong opinions from me, but I don't even know if I've answered your question, Matt, other than I don't, I think we kind of go, well, will we stop Hitler or not? I don't know that it's like one or the other. It's more about responding to the situations in front of us in the best way that we can. And yes, this is messy, and yes, the fog of war, and yes, and all those things, I get that. But what's happening right now doesn't need to be happening this way, is my opinion. And that concerns me greatly, that our government is essentially giving a green light to it. That concerns me as well. Okay. Kevin.
You say our government is essentially giving a green light to it. I think maybe what concerns me more is that the evangelical church in America gives the green light to it and seems to think that there's some sort of spiritual or biblical justification for why Israel should be in charge, should have their way. Jesus was a Jew, and God loves Israel, and all this kind of spiritual aspect. Like, I don't know if you can talk to that at all. The government's going to do what the government's going to do, but as someone that sort of identifies as a member of the American church, I'm just like, how did the church get here in this, I don't know, wildly unbiblical, to me, sort of view?
Yep. How did we get here? Yeah, that's a big question. It's a good question. I think it's an important question. I can't unpack that in its entirety at all, but I mean, the shortest version I can do off the top of my head is to simply say, you know, that in the 40s, when Israel became a state, there was a belief, a growing belief, that Israel achieving statehood would kind of unlock a set of circumstances that would ultimately bring the return of Jesus. You know, this is the reading of biblical prophecy in a certain way that put Israel's statehood front and center. And not every Christian thought that. I mean, of course, and not all Christians think that right now, but there
is that sort of a dispensationalist sort of theology?
Probably, if you're of that camp, yeah, if you view the world in terms of ages, having kind of ages, which is dispensational, these blocks of time, yeah, you might see the coming of Israel to having a state again would be maybe the ushering in of a new age or a new period that would ultimately culminate in the return of Jesus. Again, not all Christians think this, but it is quite common. You even get it when you're over there in Israel. You bump into tour groups you overhear tour guides. I mean, it's very common for people to kind of view things that way. Maybe that's not the case. I mean, I think there are some Christians who are in that camp. There are other Christians who maybe more, as you, I think, also said, just view the Jewish people as God's chosen people, and so there's kind of as us Christians connected to them, Jesus being a Jew, we should be for Israel. It's just kind of a natural support. Listen, I'm all for supporting Israel. I think Israel should have its own state. I think that's a good thing. I also want Israel to act in a way that's humanely. I also want Israel to act in a way that respects the lives of Palestinian people. And I think, on large, that is not what happens. The Israeli government intentionally, really, since its inception, has tried to keep the Palestinian people a second-class people. At best, frankly. At best. So, and that's not to say the Palestinians don't have blame. You know, they've done plenty in the decades to walk away from peace opportunities or certain elements of Palestinian culture, Hamas being one of them, has done very violent things. That certainly doesn't lead toward peace. We've already talked about that. So again, it's not one or the other. It is both and. But Israel's the one, let's also be clear, who has the power in this situation. Let's be very clear about that. Someone said, comparing Israel's military to the Palestinian, they don't have a military, of course. They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to have any weapons legally in any way, shape, or form. So comparing the power of Palestine to the power of Israel's military is like comparing the United States military to a militia in Michigan. It's just a joke. Can they wreak some havoc? Yes. Can they cause harm? We've seen that. Yep. But proportionally, it's nowhere close. So who has the power in this dynamic? It's overwhelmingly Israel. And I want to see Israel use its power well, in short. Yeah. Thanks, Kevin.
Kevin, you're making me think of something. I'm wondering, for me, there was such a shock knowing the history of Israel, or I shouldn't say Israel, the Jewish people. They would be the last group I would imagine would harm another group, because they've experienced so much horrible trauma. That's a whole history. It was just like constant displacement, constant ripping of people. tearing children out of mothers' arms. So it's so confusing to me that I wonder also, like, as someone who would just know the history of that people, Christians, if you would, like, be so slow to believe that that group of people could ever exact harm on another group. It's like it was a real unwelcomed truth that I learned. And I guess that gets, oh, Jeff's not here anymore. That gets back to the thing about how natural our want for vengeance actually is, and how we need to really be honest with that and honor it and talk to each other about it so that it doesn't slip out, and we could end up doing to somebody else like these horrors that we've experienced.
Yeah.
It's such a crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Yep. One more. We'll do one final one, and then that'll be right. It'll be a good dialogue, and then we'll also be out of here on time for Gate Baptist to get going. Sarah Jane, do you want to shout it out? Yep.
No. That's not how this. Okay, thank you. Let's see. I think, as with many circumstances that our nation and world go through, I find myself either shifting into like this very reactive state or a complete collapse state in overwhelm.
Yeah.
And so I've been finding myself and others often wondering, well, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah. Right.
Disengage.
Right.
Or this is too horrific.
Yep.
I can't take it in.
Yep.
Or this reactiveness, which can be more harmful in the long run, right? Because it's not responsive.
Yep.
So I've found myself constantly wondering, what is mine to do right now?
Yeah.
And I would just love to hear what, I know that's not a blanket answer for every human in this space, but it leads me just wondering, like, how do we not collapse long term, and how do we also not react to perpetuate more harm? And how do we do that in a way that doesn't not only harm our neighbor, but harm ourselves in the long run? So we'd just love if you could speak to that in any way, shape, or form, about what you find yourself doing or how you're encouraging other people to move through that, because it is quite a bit. Right, I think we were here in 2020. We were here before, and we're going to be here again.
That's right. Yep, we'll be here again. Yep, with something else. Well, first, I will just say to you that this has been a struggle for me too, and it's different this time because my job, or a job I have, really requires me to be in the know. Right, to be able to talk intelligently about what's happening. And that's good, that's fine. But overwhelm, yeah, I've felt that. Collapse, I've been really close a couple times. I think that if we can even just be aware of the possibility of this tension, we're moving in the right direction. In other words, for me to know that I have to be very mindful about how much I'm consuming here is a very helpful step. That awareness can then lead me to choose something hopefully intentional, instead of just getting sucked into the pit. I would say also, so this is just me speaking personally, what I found, I need people. I cannot do this or racial reconciliation work or any big thing by myself. Everything from processing with Josh, that's helpful, to Bethany saying yesterday when I was flipping through the channels and stopped on their hour-long coverage of the war, she says from the other room, "What you doing?" You know. And I was like, yeah, I probably don't need to do this right now. And then I think it's also, for me, it's helpful to try and anchor these macro, huge issues here. It helps ground me here, so that if I am wondering and curious about where vengeance might be showing up in my life, then it isn't just this massive international conflict that I really do have very little power to change. I can look at that and I can try and hold space for that, and I can act where it's possible to act. But I have the most influence here. And so how and what can I do here? The final thing I will maybe just say here is that, back to what I said, we have very little power to change a war. I think that's important to admit, because if we feel like we have, if we don't admit that, then maybe operating in the background is this idea that we do have the power to change it. And that puts us in a really tough spot. So admit it. There's not a lot you can do. That's not to say there's nothing you can do. I know, well, I'll speak personally, I'm cynical about politics these days. Yet, I am in a democracy where my vote does matter. Do I have a level of awareness about what my representatives think about this issue? Could I write them a 5-minute email? This matters to me. Does it matter to you? ? What's your positions? Send. These sorts of things do matter, potentially. I'm not saying everyone should do that. I'm not trying to get a campaign going, but there's that. Your resources might matter, could matter. Our resources, your resources. There are organizations on the ground, Palestinians and Israelis, who are doing concrete good work to try and break down this divide. You could choose to support them if you felt led to. And then the final thing I'll say that is within our power to act is conversation with people who are in our circles. So this is coming up. And I think we can say to people we know and love, well, here's what I'm learning. Or here are the things I'm wrestling with. Or I appreciate your viewpoint, but I see it differently. Here's how I've been, and this has been helpful to, right? I mean, these sorts of things, what were there in the room today? I don't know, 70, 80 people. If every one of us talked to 2 people, and those people talked to 2, you get how this works. We minimize our impact and say, what can I do? Well, actually, your actions do have impact. So maybe that's another one, is to be in dialogue when we can. Okay. Thanks. Thanks for sticking around. We'd love to, hey, you want to have a cup of coffee because this didn't quite answer all the questions or other things come up? Let's chat. Would love to do it. Watch the film. Join in. And again, thanks for being here today. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.